I remember reading about Ash when it was first announced. It was one of the early DS games I was really excited about, as it was made by the creator of Final Fantasy. However, years passed with no news of a release date. And as newer, more exciting games were released, eventually Ash faded from my mind. That was until Super Smash Bros. Ultimate came out and reminded me about it. With a little bit of digging, I was very happy to find that there was a fan-made English patch for it. I'm MEGABLADEJ, and this is my review of Ash, Archaic Sealed Heat for the Nintendo DS. Ash is a turn-based strategy game released for the DS pretty early in its lifespan. It was made by Mistwalker and published by Nintendo in Japan on October 2007. Mistwalker was the new company started by Hironobu Sakaguchi, the man known as the creator of Final Fantasy, and Ash was one of his company's first releases. In Ash, you play as Queen Aisha. Yes, that's right, a queen, not a princess for once. On her coronation day, her kingdom was attacked and burned to the ground by a giant fire snake, with her as the only survivor. While wondering why she was spared, magically, her soldiers come back to life, but with their bodies completely made out of ashes. Determined to change her friends and family back to normal, she sets off after the fire snake's trail of destruction. The game is broken up into chapters. Each chapter is made up of a story section and a combat section. Some beaten chapters can be replayed to level up your characters and collect extra items. The story is definitely one of the game's strong points. There were a few chapters around the middle that felt like filler, nothing really relevant was happening. But overall, the story had a lot of likable characters and enough plot twists that made it an enjoyable ride to the very end. Bit of a warning though, while good, the translation is a bit on the rough side. Nothing that ruins the story, but it can lead to some interesting and unintentionally hilarious lines of dialogue during emotional scenes. More on this later. Gameplay-wise, Ash is a hybrid between classic turn-based strategy and JRPGs. Battle starts off on a grid, with you moving your characters around until either you attack an enemy or they attack you. Your actions are dictated by your amount of AP or action points. You use these points for everything from moving, attacking, and using magic or items. When you run out, you won't be able to do anything else for that turn. What makes this game unique is that when you enter combat, the game switches into a classic turn-based battle. You will stay in this battle until either you kill the enemy, you die, or one side runs away. After the battle, it goes back to the grid. I've never seen a combat style like this before. I found it to be very unique and a fun way to mix up the turn-based strategy genre. At the beginning of the game, you have one combat group, with Aisha as the group leader. If she dies, it's an automatic game over. Later on, you can have up to 3 to 4 groups, each with their own group leader. If the other group leaders die, they come back next chapter. So if things are getting hairy, it's best to pull Aisha back and let the others handle it. Each group leader has a set of moves unique to them. They also have a special meter that is charged by giving and taking damage. When full, they can unleash a devastating attack that will one-shot most enemies. Your group of leaders are supported by generic troops made of ash. With enough money, you can summon and replace any that fall in combat. This includes soldiers, which are your basic fighters/tanks, black and white mages that wield attack and healing magic, monster mages that affect stats, as well as itemers that can multiply or enhance the effect of healing and attack items in your inventory. This makes them pretty versatile in what they can do, and reminds me a lot of red mages from Final Fantasy. All these different classes come with a variety of spells and abilities to help in combat, and are all very useful. Except the Stealers. They're only good for stealing crap, and as far as I can tell, are completely and utterly worthless in combat. Positioning is also important, as it can affect damage, accuracy, and even what kind of attacks and items can be used. For example, you want to have your fighters as close to your foes as possible. Not only will this increase their accuracy and attack power, but being so close, they will be targeted more often, allowing them to take the hits for weaker units like mages. Plus, if they're too far away, all they'll be able to do is just throw a rock, which does like 5 points of damage. Later on, you'll gain the ability to sacrifice your Ash soldiers. Doing so will give a status boost and transfer some of their unique spells or attacks to one of your group leaders. You can always summon new troops to replace them, so I suggest you do this often. It will open up new attacks and magic for your group leaders that they wouldn't normally get on their own. There are also glowing spots on the ground and item pots scattered around the field. The glowing spots can either fully replenish your health, magic, or AP gauge. Pots could contain a variety of items, including those you can't buy, such as revive potions and powerful weapons and armor. It's a good idea to head straight for these, as if you take too long, some baddies will snatch up the glowing spots or treasure before you do, and killing them won't always retrieve the item. While the combat system is very fun and unique, it does have a few issues. For example, in Fire Emblem, when combat is started, you get a quick attack animation, then are brought back to the field. This keeps the game moving at a pretty fast pace. But in Ash, every time you fight something, you go into a turn-based battle. Depending on the enemy types and your team setup, each fight could take anywhere from 2 to 8 minutes, slowing down each battle when compared to other strategy games. Further adding to this time issue is having to wait for enemies to make their moves. This can take a while when you're fighting a large number of foes. Not to mention enemies getting reinforcements, often 3 to 4 times per battle, sometimes spawning right behind you or at the end of a turn, so you don't have time to react. As stated before, the story is broken up into chapters, and each chapter has a battle in it. Some chapters have multiple battles, and you can't heal between rounds. Because of this, if you don't have backup fighters waiting, you can be screwed for later fights. Not to mention, if you die in a later battle, you will be sent to the beginning of that chapter, and will need to replay the entire chapter all over again. The longest fight I've had to repeat was over an hour and a half. Near the beginning of the game, this isn't that bad, as most fights have very few enemies, and you only have one team to manage. As the game progresses and you get more party members and fight larger waves of baddies, this becomes a bit more of an issue. I feel these issues wouldn't be so bad if there was some way to speed up or turn off enemy attack animations during their turn. Like the gameplay, the graphics use a few techniques to change things up. During normal cutscenes, and on the battlefield, the game uses a mixture of basic sprites and 3D models. But in combat, it makes use of pre-rendered backgrounds and animation to show what's happening. They look pretty good for a DS game, especially during one of your special attacks. There's also a surprising amount of recorded dialogue. It's all in Japanese, but it's still very impressive. The music is pretty good, it reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy XII. It was composed by, and excuse me, I'm horrible at pronouncing Japanese names, but Hitoshi Sakamoto and Masaharu Iwata. Both have worked on a variety of games, such as the Final Fantasy series, the Tactic Ogre games, and Soul Calibur. The game was only released in Japan, but there is an English patch for it online. As I said before, the translation is a bit on the rough side. From what I've been able to gather, the translator managed to complete a first draft version of the English patch and send it out to people for testing. Seems then an accident happened where all the work the translator had done was lost with a malfunctioning USB. It is unclear if they're still working on recreating what they lost, as there has not been an update on the site for many years now. Thankfully, some of the playtesters still had their version and did leak it online. Being an early draft, there are a few technical hiccups and at least 2 major game-breaking bugs that I found. Both involve a character you get early on named Emu. For some reason, if you open up her magic menu outside of combat, or look at her status screen in the pre-battle menu, the game will freeze the next time you enter combat. It seems that an official English version was in the works by Nintendo, but for some reason it was canned, which is a real shame. Though the game could use a few quality of life improvements, I feel that the positives outweigh the negatives. It has a fun and interesting story, good music, fun tactical gameplay, and took me over 40 hours to complete. Overall, I feel that it was a good game that was overlooked and is worth playing if you're a fan of strategy or JRPGs. If you want to own a physical copy, it can be bought off eBay for around $15. But seriously, play it on an emulator so you can speed up the combat. It helped out a lot, and I can only imagine how long fights would take without the option to do that. If you like the review, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. This is MEGABLADEJ, and I'll see you next mission. Bye. At the beginning of the game, you'll have each chapter is made up of can't talk with it. Being an early draft, there are a few technodrone. There are a few technodrone hiccups. God. All right. Like the gameplay, the graphics. What are graphics? Actually, I like that word. I'll write that word down and use it later. Graphics. That's my word, no one steal that. Graphics. I like it.